Comparison and contrast essay is one of the most common essays your professors will ask you to write. How do you write it? And how is it different from other essays? We'll find out in this video. Choices, and a lot of choices. In life, we always have to make choices, lots of them. And in order for us to make wise choices, we weigh similarities and differences between two or more things, ideas, and whatnot. Let's say you are in a restaurant and you're faced with several options on what to eat. Basically, you compare and contrast the prices, the taste, and if you're health conscious, maybe the ingredients. Then you make an informed decision. In the same way, if you're buying a laptop, you will compare and contrast brands in terms of their specifications, like how fast the CPU is, the price, the portability. You get the idea. So comparing and contrasting is something that we are very familiar with. To compare means to find similarities between two items. And to contrast means to find differences between them. In your classes, your professors will be testing your understanding of the material and your critical thinking skills by asking you to compare and contrast two theories, two methods, two ideas, or perhaps two belief systems. So how do you do that? How do you write a comparison and contrast essay? That's what we're going to find out in this video lesson. But before I proceed, make sure that you watch the first videos I made on how to write an essay and the different types of essays so that you can better follow along. I will put the links in the description below. A comparison-contrast essay is an expository essay, so your primary goal in writing this kind of essay is to inform or to explain. And in this case, it is to explain the similarities and differences of two items. Basically, a comparison-contrast essay is similar to other types of essay we covered in the last video. It is a similar structure, that is, it has an introduction, body, conclusion. And of course, just like any other essay, it has a thesis statement. But there are three things that make a comparison-contrast essay different from other essays. We'll go through them in detail as we talk about the 6 steps in writing a comparison and contrast essay. Usually, your professors will give you a topic to write on, subjects to compare. But it's not enough just to have a topic. You have to answer the question, why are you making a comparison and contrast of two subjects? Let's say that you have to compare iPhone and Samsung. But why? What's your purpose? If your purpose is to help buyers choose between iPhone and Samsung, then you will focus on what buyers care about: battery life, user-friendliness, and so on. But if your purpose is to help employees learn from the marketing strategies of Samsung and Apple, then you won't talk about battery life. You will talk about their philosophies, advertising strategies, etc. In other words, your purpose statement will give some direction in your writing. Okay, let's have a more academic example. Let's say that I want to compare and contrast Christianity and karma. So the question I have to answer is, why do I want to compare and contrast them? Here is a sample purpose statement: to explain to people that karma and Christianity are incompatible. Because many people and even some Christians believe that karma is biblical. So I want to show them that yes, they have similarities, but at the very core, they are totally different. Purpose statement is very important because if you know what you want to accomplish in your essay, you will have some direction. Like what I said in the previous videos, it will help you write your introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion better. For example, right now, with that purpose statement, I already know what background information I will include in my introduction. I'm going to write how Christians mistakenly believe that karma is in the Bible. If you're not yet convinced, you will realize even more the importance of a purpose statement as we go through the other steps. Also, notice that with this kind of purpose statement, I will not try to show that Christianity is better than karma. That's not my goal when doing a comparison in contrast essay, because this is not the kind of essay where you get to express your opinion. You can do that with a persuasive essay, but in this kind of essay, you simply present the facts, their similarities and differences, and write your own analysis of them. Okay, it's time for you to write similarities and differences between the two subjects that you are comparing and contrasting. And for you to be able to do this, I suggest that you use a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram looks like this. You have two overlapping circles, one for each of the subjects. So in the outer circles, write down their differences, and in the inner part, where they overlap, write down their similarities. Now, let's try that with our sample topic, Christianity versus karma. For their similarities, both Christianity and karma teach about sowing and reaping. If you sow good deeds, then you reap something good. If you sow bad deeds, then you reap something bad. Both of them also teach that there is an afterlife. And for their differences, karma is a philosophy that is attached to several religions, whereas Christianity is a religion. And lastly, karma teaches reincarnation, while Christianity doesn't. There you go. Those are our initial similarities and differences. As you begin writing the similarities and differences of the subjects you are comparing and contrasting, at first, you may not have all the facts that you need, but just try to begin with something. After you write initial similarities and differences, it is time to do some research to gather more information and to check if your facts are correct. So, read books or journals. When we say journals, we mean researches or studies. Or you can also read from websites, but try to do away from Wikipedia because people can edit it anytime, can edit the articles anytime. So you may end up getting wrong information. So it's not that reliable. Alright, we are now in step number 3. So for step number 3, you need to choose points or categories for comparison and contrast that you will include in your essay. How do you do this? Look at your list of similarities and differences and try to put them under different categories. After that, go back to your purpose statement. Then ask yourself, what points or categories do I need to include in my essay so that I can achieve my purpose? Let's go back to our example. Again, our goal is to explain to people that karma and Christianity are not compatible. And since this is our goal, we can include points of their similarities and from there, jump into their differences. So we can include these 3 categories: consequences of one's actions, concept of afterlife, and means to attaining perfection. Now that we have our points for comparison, it's now time to write an outline. We have 2 possible outlines we can use in writing a comparison and contrast essay. The first one is the block structure. If you use this structure, then your outline will look something like this. So of course we have the introduction, and in the body part you have two paragraphs, one for each subject. The first one is karma. In this paragraph we can write about karma's teachings on the three categories we've chosen. What does karma teach about consequences of one's actions, the afterlife, and how to attain perfection? And in the second paragraph, we can do the same thing for Christianity. We will talk about what the Bible teaches about the consequences of one's actions. And not only that, this is the part wherein we get to compare and or contrast it with karma's teaching on the same point. And we can do the same thing for the concept of afterlife, the afterlife in attaining perfection. So if you can notice in the first paragraph, we didn't do any comparison or contrast, but in the second paragraph, we will do that. And lastly, the conclusion. So if you choose this method, make sure that you don't just list down the teachings of karma in Christianity, because some students have the tendency to do that. You have to connect them, compare and contrast them. That's why we call it a comparison contrast essay. The other structure is the point-by-point structure. In this structure, you will have one paragraph per category. So if you have three categories, then you're going to have three paragraphs. Now for this structure, we have of course the introduction, but in the body part, this is where it becomes different. Because if instead of having just two paragraphs, we have three paragraphs. One paragraph for each point. Since we have 3 points, we're going to have 3 paragraphs. And under each point, we can talk about the similarities and differences of Christianity and karma. And of course, we have the conclusion. So can you see the difference? How is it different from the previous structure? Okay, maybe at this point you're asking the question, what structure should I use? Well, one structure is not necessarily better than the other, so you can choose either one of them. But point-by-point method makes it easier for you to provide better analysis because you can include your analysis in all paragraphs. Whereas for the block method, you can only write your analysis in one paragraph. For that reason, in this specific video lesson, I've chosen to use the point-by-point method, which you will see as we go to the next step. Now that we have our outline, we're ready to write our paragraphs. Let's jump right into our example and talk about some things we can learn from it. Both karma and Christianity teach the idea of sowing and reaping. That is, if you sow good deeds, you will reap good things, and conversely, if you sow bad deeds, you will reap sufferings. These consequences may be experienced both in this lifetime and in the afterlife. However, although the Bible also teaches the principle of sowing and reaping, karma's concept is not the same as Jesus' teachings. According to Jesus, his followers will suffer for doing good and faithfully following him. And suffer they did. The apostles and the believers in the first century and thereafter were persecuted for their faith. Through the lens of karma, such suffering can be seen as a consequence of one's previous bad deeds. But on the other hand, through the lens of Christianity, such suffering is ordained by a personal, sovereign God who causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Therefore, When it comes to teachings about the consequences of one's actions, karma and Christianity are incompatible. So, what can you notice in this paragraph? Again, I used the point by point method, and in this part, I wrote the first category, which is consequences of one's actions. You can see that in the first part, I showed the seeming similarity between Christianity and karma. Because of this similarity, a lot of people assume that the concept of karma is actually taught in the Bible. So in the second part, I show that if we analyze closely, they are different and incompatible. So with this paragraph, I can say that so far, I think I'm able to reach my purpose, which is to explain to people, especially to Christians, that karma and Christianity are incompatible. Also notice that I used transition words. It's very important that you use transition words because you don't want to just present facts. Don't just list them down, connect them to each other using transition words. Now these are some of the transition words that you can use in writing your comparison contrast essay body paragraphs. For similarity, you can use similarly, likewise, also, a correlative conjunction both and, like, or just like. For differences, you can use but, although, while, whereas, unlike, however, on the other hand, on the contrary, and in contrast. For the final steps, you will be writing your introduction and conclusion. The introduction for a comparison contrast essay has basically the same structure as that of a normal essay. So you have the hook, background information, and of course, the thesis statement. But instead of starting with the hook and background information, I suggest you work your way up. You work your way backwards. I mean, start with a thesis statement, then write the background information, and finally the hook. I will show you why later on. Speaking of thesis statement, if you notice, we didn't write the thesis statement at the beginning. Normally in an essay, it should be the first thing you should write because it will provide the direction of your essay. But we did that intentionally because in a comparison contrast essay, it's not necessary. We usually write the thesis statement after writing the outline and the body paragraphs. The reason for this is in your thesis statement, you need to include the points for comparison. Look at this example. On the surface, the concept of karma looks very similar to the teachings of Christianity. But upon a critical analysis of it, the two are fundamentally different, especially in three aspects: consequences of actions, concept of afterlife, and means to attaining perfection. So, what can you notice in this thesis statement? You can probably notice that I mentioned the 3 points of comparison: consequences of actions, concept of afterlife, and means to attaining perfection. This is necessary in writing a thesis statement for your comparison contrast essay because you want to give an overview of the points of comparison and contrast as early as in your introduction. Okay? Also notice that not only did I give the points of comparison and contrast, but I also made a point. Although karma and Christianity look similar, they are fundamentally different. That's the point I try to make. And how did I come up with this point? From my purpose statement. This is the most important point I want to make in my essay since my purpose, again, is to explain to people, especially to Christians, that karma and Christianity are incompatible. So that's how important your purpose statement is. I cannot overemphasize that. So write it down. Okay, now that we have our thesis statement, let's provide some background information. So, what information do we need to provide so that our readers would understand the thesis statement well enough? So, perhaps we can talk about what is karma for those who might not be familiar with it. Or we can also include a point like many people of different cultures and belief systems talk about it. And even Christians think it is biblical. So if we put these points all together in one paragraph, it would look like this. Karma has been loosely used by people across different cultures, religions, and belief systems, which is not surprising since it is considered as a universal law. What is surprising though is Christians also use it in their conversations and even inside churches. In fact, some Christians believe that karma is a biblical concept, which only goes to show that many of them are not aware of karma's religious origins. Karma's basic premise is if you do good, good things will happen to you. If you do bad, bad things will happen to you. Alright, so far so good. Now, the only thing we're missing is a hook. Something that will catch the interest of our readers. So perhaps we can use statements that we often hear people use about karma so that when they read it, they'll be interested in reading it. Hopefully. Statements like, what goes around comes around, and karma will get you. Karma will get them. You've probably heard this expression somewhere quite a lot. So that's our hook. I'm not gonna read the background information in the thesis statement again. You can pause this video and reread it if you want. But I hope you could see that it might be easier to work our way up, starting with the thesis statement, the background information, then the hook. Because it will be hard to think of what to include in the background information if you don't have a thesis statement to introduce, right? And the same goes with the hook. And we are down to our last paragraph, the conclusion. So the conclusion for a comparison contrast essay will basically be the same with that of the other types of essay. Again, if you remember, a conclusion has two parts. One is the restatement of your thesis or a summary of the main points you made, and the second one is a final comment. Let's say that your goal was to help your readers decide what to choose between iPhone and a Samsung phone. Then help them do just that with your final comment. Maybe you can write, if you want a phone that is simple and easy to use, choose iPhone. But if you want a phone that packs a lot of features, then choose Samsung. This can be your final comment. Again, your final comment will largely depend on your purpose statement. Now, for our Christianity versus karma essay, our conclusion can be along these lines. In conclusion, many Christians refer to karma as if it is a biblical term or concept. But upon deeper examination of its teachings, especially in the areas of consequences of one's actions, concept of afterlife, and means to attaining perfection, karma with its religious origins is irreconcilable and incompatible with Christianity's teachings. Such misunderstanding calls for Christians to venture into a more serious and deeper study of the Bible so that they can correctly evaluate mainstream teachings against the teachings of the Bible. So, can you guess what I tried to do in the first part? Yes, I restated the thesis statement. I paraphrased it. Then, in my final comment, I talked about one implication of the facts I presented in the body paragraphs. Remember, my purpose was to explain to people, especially to Christians, that karma and Christianity are incompatible. So I thought this is one important application for Christians who are ignorant about their Bibles. They need to correctly evaluate mainstream teachings against the teachings of the Bible. There you go. Those are the 6 steps needed to write a comparison contrast essay. Understand that they are suggested steps. You don't need to follow them all the time, especially the order. Perhaps you can switch some steps if you find it necessary, but I think following them faithfully will save you some time, especially if you're only beginning to write a comparison contrast essay. So, try to stick with them. Okay, let's review what we've learned so far. How is comparison contrast essay different from other types of essay? So you have 2 structures that you can use, the block method and point-by-point method. And you also have to use transition signals for comparison and contrast. And you also have to write your thesis statement in a different way. And here are the steps in writing an essay. Step 1. Write down your purpose statement. Step 2. Write down similarities and differences between the subjects you are comparing and contrasting. And step 3. Choose points for comparison and contrast. After that, step 4. Write an outline. And when you're able to write your outline, write your paragraphs for step 5. And finally, write your introduction and conclusion. That's it for our video. I hope that you're feeling confident to write your own comparison and contrast essay. Now that I'm done, it's your turn to write your very own essay. Perhaps you can start by comparing and contrasting Christianity and the most predominant religion in your country. It's not enough just to know these things. You have to practice and write your own comparison contrast essay, because remember, in learning English, use it or lose it. Teacher Alger here. I'll see you in the next video.